Imagine a nation teetering on the brink, not from external invasion alone, but from a chilling internal unraveling. The very foundations of Russia, once seemingly impenetrable, are now cracking under the weight of a war it cannot seem to win, and a populace increasingly disillusioned. This isn't just about geopolitical struggles, but about a society pushed to its limits. We're going to explore the grim reality of a country where whispers of discontent are turning into open defiance, where the very fabric of its military and economy are fraying at the edges. The question is, how much longer can this fragile structure hold before it collapses? This is the story of Russia's precarious present and a potentially catastrophic future. Today, we delve deep into a narrative of turmoil and unease. We'll be dissecting a situation where Russia is struggling with an increasingly unpopular war, economic pressures that are beginning to cripple it, and the rising tide of public opposition towards Vladimir Putin. We'll uncover the complex layers of internal conflict threatening to tear the nation apart, examining the military's struggles, the faltering economy, and the growing resistance to the Kremlin's rule. Our journey will be divided into 7 crucial chapters, each illuminating a different facet of this unfolding crisis. By the end of this exploration, you will have a clear understanding of the forces at play, the potential outcomes, and the precarious position Russia finds itself in today. Stay with us until the end, because our conclusions will paint an even more dramatic picture of what's at stake. Chapter 1. The Fraying Military. The Russian military machine, once a symbol of national pride, is now showing signs of significant strain. The relentless recruitment drive initiated by Vladimir Putin to fuel the war in Ukraine has left vast swathes of the country's workforce depleted, throwing its economic and civilian sectors into chaos. The partial mobilization of 300,000 individuals in 2022 dealt a severe blow to the Russian economy, which was already showing cracks. Now, rumors abound that a fresh wave of mobilization, potentially involving another 300,000 people, is imminent. This decision reflects a dire need for manpower, as the number of willing volunteers to fight in Ukraine dwindles, plummeting from hundreds daily to a mere few dozen, forcing the Kremlin to resort to coercion. This constant drain on human resources, along with Russia's struggles to sustain current attrition rates, is deeply undermining its military capacity and industrial output, casting a long shadow over its future. Chapter 2. Industrial Collapse. The war in Ukraine is not only depleting Russia's military manpower, but also tearing apart the nation's production capacity. The Russian defense industry, once a powerhouse, is now struggling to keep up with the demands of the ongoing conflict. Reports suggest that the country is being forced to revert to outdated Soviet-era equipment, with 80% of current military hardware being refurbished from long-term storage. While Russian factories claim significant production numbers for main battle tanks and missiles, the fact is that most of these are refurbished units pulled from warehouses. If current attrition rates continue in Ukraine, it is highly likely that Russia's ground forces will face severe equipment shortages by 2026. The industry is unable to produce advanced weapon systems such as the Su-57 fighter jet or the T-14 Armata tank at any meaningful scale. This has not only hampered the country's defense exports, which have fallen from 21% to 11% of global arms sales, but it's also created a significant imbalance within the country's defense capabilities. The struggle to fulfill contracts for large, complex weapon systems is exacerbated by persistent production problems, forcing the diversion of existing products to compensate for losses. Chapter 3. The Labor Shortage Crisis. Russia's labor market is facing a severe crisis because of the relentless military recruitment. In response, Russian defense enterprises began offering inflated salaries to attract workers, bringing in 520,000 new workers in the past year and a half. Yet this strategy has fallen far short of what is needed. By the end of 2023, the defense sector needed about 75,000 specialists. This figure more than doubled within 6 months, currently requiring around 160,000 specialists. Across all industries, Russia is short of more than 500,000 workers, of which a third are specialists. The nationalized Pромsvyaz Bank, responsible for supporting defense procurement, has warned Putin that Russia's workforce is slowly preparing for collapse. First Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov predicts that Russia will need more than 250,000 specialists in 2025, a record number that is unlikely to be achievable while the war continues. This labor deficit is not just a number, it is a reflection of a systemic imbalance. President Putin himself has called for an urgent solution to this crisis, highlighting the critical threat it poses to Russia's defense capabilities. Chapter 4: Economic Instability. Russia's economic landscape is increasingly unstable, with significant repercussions felt across the nation. While the exact scale of Russian defense spending remains unclear, analysts estimate it at $108 billion in 2023, with a 60% increase in 2024, reaching 7.5% of its GDP. This shift toward a war economy has fueled a 3% to 3.5% growth in GDP, but this growth is unsustainable as the military absorbs the lion's share of the country's resources. Russia is attempting to utilize energy revenues to offset the strain, leveraging its position as a global supplier. Yet, this strategy is precarious. Though Russian oil is currently trading at around $78 per barrel, the tightening of sanctions and the depletion of the National Wealth Fund pose significant challenges. The U.S. Treasury Department claims that the oil price cap has already reduced Russian revenue by 40%, indicating the limits to the country's ability to sustain high levels of defense spending. The Russian defense and industrial sectors are now operating under what's described as a Kalashnikov economy, focusing on mass production of basic, durable, and often outdated weaponry. This strategy does not address the longer-term deficiencies in producing advanced technology and is a temporary solution to a much deeper crisis. Chapter 5: Growing Public Dissatisfaction. The relentless war and its economic consequences are sparking a rise in public discontent, with signs of revolt emerging in different parts of the country. The residents of border regions have begun to protest the conditions, with many Russian families facing severe hardships. The region on Russia's border with Ukraine is bracing for a harsh winter with potential power outages and lack of heating. The governors of these regions are preparing by stockpiling firewood, installing cast iron stoves, and purchasing generators. The unemployment rate has reached 2 million, placing immense pressure on the economy and the business environment, a situation that is further exacerbated by Western sanctions. These sanctions are seen as the primary factor that has turned a significant number of Russians against the war. This opposition, which spans various sectors of society, is being met with harsh criminal sanctions and prison sentences. But the situation is starting to spin out of Putin's control. The ruble has become incredibly weak, now valued at less than a cent, making it one of the world's worst-performing currencies this year. Russia is facing a serious food inflation crisis, with prices surging across the board, hitting the most vulnerable, leading to growing food insecurity. Chapter 6: Cracks in the Foundation. The Russian economy is showing major cracks under the strain of war and sanctions, threatening the stability of the nation. Food prices are increasing at an unprecedented rate, while fuel prices are also climbing, despite efforts to stabilize the domestic market. The construction industry is also experiencing escalating costs, all adding to the pressure. The inflationary spiral is compounded by the Bank of Russia's decision to raise the key interest rate to 21%, the highest it has been since 2003, in a move that has surprised financial analysts worldwide. This move, while intended to curb inflation, is likely to further destabilize businesses and force the stoppage of high-tech product exports. President Putin is facing open opposition to his economic policy, and the very elites that have benefited from his rule are now feeling the pain. The sanctions have also hit Russian oligarchs who are fleeing the country. The situation has now developed into something that seems to have moved beyond Putin's control, with the country's economy deteriorating and its currency worth almost nothing. Russia's economy is now heavily dependent on war spending, facing major risks of overheating. Export revenues are dwindling, and the country's national wealth fund is shrinking. The problems created by the labor shortage are made worse by sanctions-related restrictions on access to critical Western technology. All of these are contributing to a slower growth, if not outright recession. Chapter 7: The Unfolding Rebellion and a Twist. As we've seen, Russia is facing multiple crises: a collapsing military and industry, a crippling economy, widespread public dissatisfaction, and escalating internal conflict. The stage is set for the perfect storm, and the nation is inching closer to chaos. Discontent has manifested as growing resistance to Putin's rule, a sense of betrayal among soldiers, and widespread economic hardship across the nation. The Russian people face a critical dilemma in a war that seems to be pushing Russia into internal conflicts. Trust and loyalty in Putin have been severely undermined, and many soldiers are secretly supporting Ukraine, providing valuable intelligence and even carrying out sabotage missions. The combination of all these factors is pushing Russia to the brink of a civil war. While public demonstrations against the war have been limited, support for ending the conflict has increased significantly. The reality is that the war has divided the Russian people, with a deep divide between pro-war individuals and those who want an end to the senseless bloodshed. However, a new threat is rising, one nobody expected. The soldiers working for Ukraine and a growing number of Russian citizens who are against the war, instead of engaging in civil conflict, are now uniting under a single cause, forming an organization called the United Front for Russian Renewal, aiming not to fight within their nation, but to create a new, democratic Russia, free from the tyranny they've suffered. Their goal isn't merely to end the war, but to fundamentally change the system from within, making Russia a peaceful, prosperous nation. This new dynamic, shifting from civil war to a fight for political change, could reshape the entire landscape of Russia's future, making it anything but predictable. What started as a story of potential civil war has taken a surprising turn, and this is only the beginning of a new chapter. The situation in Russia is incredibly precarious. We've seen how a combination of military failures, economic hardship, and public disillusionment is pushing the country toward instability. But there is still hope. The formation of the United Front for Russian Renewal introduces an unexpected twist to the narrative, suggesting that the path to change may be different than what many anticipated. The future of Russia is far from certain and is poised for some very turbulent times ahead. The story is far from over. We invite you to stay tuned for our next video, where we will continue to explore these developments and bring you the latest information.